FM News Talk 97.1.
On-demand audio.
First of all, though, Mr. Tim Jones, former Missouri House Speaker, is joining us right now. Tim, how are you?
Great, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Great
show as always today.
You're back in Missouri. Your feet are back on the ground. You've been jetting all over the place.
I have, and I'm actually, Mark, I'm actually heading to North Carolina in a couple days, and Governor McCrory is doing great work over there, and, you know, God help us, we can get ourselves a good governor here in the state of Missouri this year to do things like tax cuts and become the 27th right-to-work state and reduce regulations and the burden and all that.
Absolutely. You know, I was looking at the Missouri Club for Growth, talking about some of the legislative victories they had in the recent primary election, the candidates they got behind. Tell me why that's important.
So, Mark, the Missouri Club for Growth is another project that I work on a daily basis. I happen to be the chairman of that group. I was always a fan of theirs when I was in the legislature, and I was always supported by them. We are a fiscally conservative political action committee, and we have a board of 6 men and women spread out all across the state of Missouri. And what we look at is we look at the actual makeup of the constituency of both the Missouri House and Missouri Senate. Are the Republicans truly voting as Republicans and moving forward a good conservative Republican agenda? So we definitely do play in primaries as well as general elections. And, last 2 weeks ago, the executive level races, the results were a little odd, kind of a little across the board, but I'm very happy to report that the Club for Growth supported candidates for the House and the Senate were almost entirely victorious. And, Mark, that's important because whoever the governor is, you still got to have strong legislative leadership, and that legislative leadership generally needs a large group of legislators behind them all rolling on the same direction. And the issues we work on are tax reform, you know, broadening the base, reducing the taxes on income, on people's labors, on labor reform, everything from right to work to paycheck protection to prevailing wage reform to tort reform, you know, making sure we have a fair, equitable judicial system. And as a former practicing attorney, I know how important it is to have a level playing field. And I'll tell you, Mark, every year the National Tort Association puts out a scorecard. And Missouri ranks, unfortunately, near the bottom, like we do on a lot of other economic indicators. And whoever the governor is, you got to have a strong legislature as well that helps move those issues forward. Because we're, as you point out many times, staggering statistic. We are 47th in GDP growth in the nation.
Well, you know, I was looking at one of the races in particular for the 23rd Synod District out in St. Charles County. You guys got behind Bill Eigel, right?
Yes, epic battle. Mark, that race defines the type of candidate and the type of race and the type of political philosophy that the Club for Growth stands for. You had about the clearest distinction between two Republicans you possibly could have.
Yeah.
Bill Eigel, businessman. He lives in St. Charles. He's got a St. Louis-based business in St. Louis County. He's a former military. He has served our country. I believe his wife is former military as well. Great family, great kids, great business owner, and very successful. And he said he got frustrated because he saw that Senate race going in the wrong direction. He saw, Ann Zaire, who I served with, wanting to go from the House to the Senate, and she had, in my opinion, a less than stellar House voting record. She was getting worse every year, voting against religious freedom, voting against worker freedom, just someone who really was enamored with corporate giveaways and tax credits to the nth degree. Bill Eigel presented a stark contrast to that, so the voters were given a clear choice. Mark, I can tell you, the unions and the lobbyists threw everything and the kitchen sink at Bill Eigel to try to get him to lose, pulled every dirty trick in the book, tried to get Democrats to pull Republican ballots, which we know they did, and he was still victorious because his message of conservatism, of fiscal conservatism, and of a pro-growth message, that's the one that won, and that's a positive sign for Missouri.
Well, I'm glad to see it. Now, let's talk about the governor race for a minute, and maybe not necessarily from Missouri Club for Growth point of view, but that Missouri Scout poll that came out recently, I read about it. The governor's race is a couple of points right now. I mean, that's that bodes well for Eric Greitens. I expected a bigger margin, quite frankly.
It does. It's a good initial snapshot, but I'll play devil's advocate a little bit and point out something from a different point of view. Eric Greitens has spent the last year to year and a half campaigning all across the state of Missouri, and spent personally through his campaign. His campaign spent over $10 million to generate name ID, to translate that into his success, his 10-point success. I will definitely give him a lot of credit for that at the ballot box. Chris Koster has been waiting in the wings, been very quiet, hasn't done a thing, hasn't lifted a finger, has hardly spent a dime of his $10.5 million war chest. If I'm Eric Greitens, I'm a little concerned that I'm still 2 points behind after campaigning for a year and a half in a conservative red state and spending $10 million. So I still think Greitens has a lot of work to do if he's going to beat Chris Koster, who I call him the King Kong of campaigning. He's going to do very well as a very conservative, NRA, A-plus rated, agriculture-supported Democrat.
Well, I worry every time I see the commercials that air on all the TV stations, because nowhere on it does it use the D word. He never mentions it. He's
very clever, Mark. He's very good. He is a... Let's recall this. Chris Koster is a former Republican.
Right.
He was a Republican state senator for 8 years, his entire tenure. He only switched in 2008 when he decided to run for attorney general. And at that time, let's remember who was running. Barack Obama. Mm-hmm. It was a Democratic year, almost from sea to shining sea. And he tested the political winds and thought, Missouri's still a little bit of a purple state back then, and I'm going to go ahead and cast my lot with the Democrats. He has a lot of Democrats, Mark, especially the new version of the Democratic Party, the left-wing liberal wing, which has pretty much nearly entirely taken over the Democratic Party. They're not big fans of Chris Koster, but he's their guy. Nobody else stood up to him, and so he's their horse. And as I mentioned, he's A-plus rated by the NRA. He just picked up 3 huge agriculture endorsements this week. And maybe for those of us in suburban and urban St. Louis, we go to the store to pick up our food, right? But we forget it's grown on a farm. Very important in Missouri. That is a lot of Missouri. Most of Missouri is agriculturally based. You get outside the cities. Farm Bureau, Corn Growers, and Soybean Association all endorse Chris Koster. First time Farm Bureau has ever endorsed a Democrat in state history.
Yeah.
That means that those endorsements mean something. Usually endorsements, Mark, I kind of take them with a grain of salt, but the farmers of the state and everybody related to farming, there's a lot of people related to farming or have something to do with agriculture. They do pay attention to that. And the problem with Eric Greitens is he definitely needs to work on defining himself a little more clearly, because many Republicans still have a lot of questions about it.
And hopefully he can do that, and we all need to do our part, because what difference it would make to have somebody with an R after the name in that governor's office, that's for sure.
So many things would get across the finish line, Mark, from right to work to significant tax cuts to reducing bureaucracy. Missouri cannot continue to function 47th in GDP growth in the country. Anybody has got to be better than Jay Nixon, but yes, a Republican at the helm would really skyrocket this state forward.
So the Club for Growth has a website, moclubforgrowth.org, right? So people can go there and check it out?
That's correct. You can look at our scorecards. We're very choosy when it comes to supporting candidates because we want our endorsement, our support to mean something. We believe that these are truly the best conservative Republicans in the state. They are the leaders of today, the future leaders of tomorrow. Many of them are right here in your listening audience, Mark. People can go check out to see if your state senator or representative is on the list, and if they're not, you need to find out why not. And we will be working now on some very key races for the general election as well.
Very good. Tim Jones, always a pleasure. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Mark. You too. Stay cool, and we'll see you soon.
We will talk soon. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. Good to have him on.